This is your area of specialty, so cancer is something that you've looked at, your whole career. When you are looking at the COVID vaccine, what do you think are potential causes? Why would it be causing cancer?
This is a very complex topic. A number of mechanisms have been proposed in the literature and are starting to get backed by publications and findings in the literature. The main one, you'd mentioned it earlier, the modification of the mRNA, the methylated pseudouridine that they inserted into the mRNA, that seems to dampen the innate immune system through toll-like receptors, and that has downstream effects, downstream effects that haven't been studied. One of those possible downstream effects is you damage cancer surveillance. And if you're damaging cancer surveillance, now you increase the risk of someone developing a very aggressive cancer, because it is really your immune system that's keeping these cancers in check. And so there are a number of mechanisms by which the mRNA vaccines seem to be altering the signaling of immune cells, of T cells and other cells in the immune system, and that translates to an impaired cancer surveillance overall. There's other mechanisms, though, that have come up. There's always the risk of the integration of the mRNA into our genomes, or reverse transcription. There's been recent discoveries of DNA contamination in the Pfizer and Moderna vials.
We actually have a video of a top-rated scientist. I believe it's out of Virginia. Take a look at this, folks. This just happened last week.
My name is Philip Buchholz. I have a PhD in biochemistry and molecular biology. I'm a cancer gene jock. Basically, I do cancer genomics research at the University of South Carolina. And what that means is that I'm kind of an expert on all the ways that the human genome can get futzed with during your lifetime, and which of those things cause cancer and which ones don't. The Pfizer vaccine is contaminated with plasmid DNA. It's not just mRNA. It's got bits of DNA in it. This DNA is the DNA vector that was used as the template for the in vitro transcription reaction when they made the mRNA. I know this is true because I sequenced it in my own lab. The vials of Pfizer vaccine that were given out here in Columbia, one of my colleagues was in charge of that vaccination program in the College of Pharmacy, and for reasons that I still don't understand, he kept every single vial. So he had a whole freezer full of the empty vials. Well, the empty vials have a little tiny bit in the bottom of them. He gave them all to me, and I looked at them. We had 2 batches that were given out here in Columbia, and I checked these 2 batches, and I checked them by sequencing. And I sequenced all the DNA that was in the vaccine, and I can see what's in there. And it's surprising that there's any DNA in there, and you can kind of work out what it is and how it got there, and I'm kind of alarmed about the possible consequences of this, both in terms of human health and biology, but you should be alarmed about the regulatory process that allowed it to get there. So this DNA, in my view, it could be causing some of the rare but serious side effects like death from cardiac arrest. So there's a lot of cases now of people having suspicious death after vaccine. It's hard to prove what caused it. It's just, temporally associated. And this DNA is a plausible mechanism. It's different from RNA because it can be permanent. This is a real hazard for genome modification of long-lived somatic cells, like stem cells. And it could cause, theoretically, this is all a theoretical concern, but it's pretty reasonable based on solid molecular biology, that it could cause a sustained autoimmune attack toward that tissue. It's also a very real theoretical risk of future cancer in some people. Depending on where in the genome this foreign piece of DNA lands, it can interrupt a tumor suppressor or activate an oncogene. I think it'll be rare, but I think the risk is not zero, and it may be high enough that we are to figure out if this is happening or not.
This is something that's getting a lot of attention. We had Kevin McKiernan on the show just a few weeks ago talking about, I think he was one of the ones that really discovered this plasmids hanging out, this DNA material in the vaccines. Obviously, this is a man who studies cancers also. He's very alarmed about this. I have a question for you. I think some of us are a little bit confused when he's like, this is DNA, that this shouldn't be there. This, really has the potential to land in the wrong place, cause cancer. It seems that he's more concerned than he would be if it was mRNA, because obviously there's supposed to be mRNA in this vaccine. What is the difference between mRNA and DNA, and why is one more problematic than the other?
So it's a lot more difficult for the mRNA sequence to get integrated into our genome. It is a lot easier for the DNA to be integrated.
Okay.
And these are small rings of DNA, so they're called DNA plasmids. It arises out of the manufacturing process that Pfizer and Moderna have in mass producing these vaccines. The other danger of these DNA plasmids, well, first of all, there's a lot of them. So the contamination, it's not minute amounts. I believe Kevin McKernan had reported up to 30% of the genetic material in the vaccine vial could be this DNA contamination. So you have a lot of it. And these DNA plasmids, these very small rings, can be integrated not just into our DNA, but it can be picked up by our gut bacteria, or it could be picked up by other bacteria in our body. And then these bacteria could be theoretically producing spike protein.
Wow, so they start just reproducing
Exactly.
it. And then I think about, the fact that when we look at, and we think about like gene splicing or all this work that was going to try and just make DNA inserts, and that would be the future of medicine and science. And it just seems that a lot of that work is held up. We've been decades waiting for products that could somehow go in and cure cancer. And I think similarly, one of the things they found is no matter how we try and, put that insert in, if it doesn't land exactly right, it tends to always cause cancer, is what I feel like is a side effect of all of that sort of work in the future of science. And in many ways, this is sort of the accidental side of that, right? We're using a DNA mRNA product, it's floating around, and wherever it lands, it could just wreak havoc in your DNA and your immune system.
There's a lot of work being done right now to try to alter the outside of the lipid nanoparticles to be able to direct them to certain locations in the body. I know that now they're looking at integrating CRISPR technology into lipid nanoparticles. This is dangerous work, but the problem with rolling out this technology, this lipid nanoparticle mRNA technology with these COVID vaccines, was that there were no modifications to the lipid nanoparticles, and they told us that it would stay in the arm, and this goes systemic. And I think that really is where all the injuries, vaccine injuries that we're seeing stem from, including the cancers, is that this goes systemic, and then you've got tremendous effects on the immune system. Another possible mechanism of cancer arising is this, what we call antibody shift, this IgG4 antibody shift. And that again is a feature of our immune system where if you're getting repeatedly exposed to the same antigen, then your body starts to produce a different kind of antibody called IgG4 that actually gives you tolerance to that antigen.
So it kind of gives up on killing it. It's just like, I just want to live and let live. I'm just going to let it hang out in the body now and not fight anymore.
Exactly. So another discovery a few months ago, there was a discovery that if you've had 2 COVID vaccines, you start to produce a little bit of this new antibody, this IgG4. But if you've had 3 vaccines, if you had the booster shot, your IgG4 levels go up 500-fold.
Wow.
And then suddenly it goes from 0.04% to 20% of the antibodies you're producing. And that shifts your immune system completely. You're not producing IgG1 and 3 anymore, and these are the antibodies that actually handle the viral infections, but they also handle cancer surveillance.
Wow.
So you're more likely now to get infected, not just with COVID-19. So you see people who've had their booster shot, 3 vaccines, 4 vaccines, 5 vaccines, they keep getting reinfected with COVID-19 over and over, or they get sick very often with influenza. But you're also reducing cancer surveillance as well, because you don't have those IgG1 and 3 anymore, so you're impairing cancer surveillance. That could be another mechanism by which all these turbo cancers are arising in people who've had 3 or more shots. The turbo cancers, I'm seeing lymphomas, I'm seeing brain cancers, stage 4 brain cancers, and then breast cancers, colon cancers, lung cancers. The leukemias that are showing up in the COVID vaccinated individuals, they can kill in a matter of days or even hours. I've reported several cases where young kids, 13 years old, 16 years old, they feel unwell, they go to emergency, and the doctors discover that they have leukemia, and then they die a few hours later. These are tragic stories, and oncologists they're not talking about it. There's only Professor Daglish in St. George's University in London, United Kingdom, who's sounding the alarm, and he has seen his patients who were stable cancer patients who took a COVID booster shot and suddenly their cancer is growing out of control, and so he's sounding the alarm. But doctors are being persecuted for speaking up and for causing vaccine hesitancy.
You've written over 100 papers in your career on the subject of cancer. You've been doing some work with Dr. Peter McCullough. He has a recent paper out with some photos I thought were really pretty shocking. Let's take a look at this. His Bell's palsy, or an aggressive infiltrating basiloid carcinoma post-mRNA vaccination for COVID-19. This sort of just look at this is, I guess, the ear and face of this gentleman, where this is the mechanism, of how it works. It sort of gives you the flow chart. And everybody, you're going to get this if you are signed up to our newsletter, so you can get all the data. But, it starts out with this pulse, like his eyes drooping, his face is drooping. Clearly there's issues. And then it kind of just seems to get worse and worse and worse. As you're saying, it's just, this is like a horror movie, what happened to this guy. That's inside of his head. You can see it's, obviously growing, swelling, all sorts of issues. It's just really, it's just amazing to me that there's so much detail in this now. We're seeing images like this, studies being done. These aren't, it's not like some crazy group of people, like really top scientists. I think there was one other study we've shown before, which was just a before and after of the accumulation of cancer. This was the rapid progression of immunoblastic T-cell lymphoma following the Pfizer vaccine booster shot, a case report. And in this, look at this, folks, look at the before and after. Those little black dots represent sort of the cancers, and just it explodes inside this person's body. So
this was a very important case because this was one of the first cases of turbo cancer ever published. And it was a 66-year-old man who had 2 Pfizer shots. 5 months later develops lymph nodes in the neck, and they diagnosed him with a lymphoma. And at the time, the doctors didn't realize that there could be any connection between the 2 Pfizer vaccines he took and his lymphoma. And so in preparation for his chemotherapy, they said, we're going to give you a Pfizer booster shot. And so they gave him the Pfizer booster shot to protect him during chemotherapy. And within a few days, he feels his neck nodes just swell up. And
So I see. So that's why you see cancer in him in the first one. That's after 2 shots. No one knows it. He gets the third one, and it just explodes overnight throughout his whole body.
And so they decide, we've done imaging recently, but let's just do another image just in case, to have a good baseline just before we start your chemotherapy. And they do the second image, and they see to their horror that the cancer has just exploded. And this is 8 days after his Pfizer booster shot.
Wow.
And the cancer, so the original tumors grew to a much larger size, and then there were new lymph nodes, in the axilla, in the abdomen, and in the groin area as well. So the cancer had spread all over his body in a matter of 8 days. And they published it, and it's the first example and first imaging example that we had of what these turbo cancers look like and what they could do.
When we think of timing, 8 days, how long would you normally, if you're going to watch somebody that was going to sort of evolve into that position, how long should that take for a cancer like that that's in your lymph node?
Well, that could take a couple of years. Certainly, it would take many months. When you look at the first image, it took 5 months to get to the first image, and he already had 2 Pfizer vaccines, but then you add the booster into the picture,
and 8 days.
And that's just 8 days his cancer explodes. And we come back to this idea of the more shots you take, the more damage your immune system takes. And I think that was what the Cleveland Clinic study showed so well.
Yeah.
More doses, more immune system damage, and the more aggressive your cancer can be now that you've completely destroyed your immune system's surveillance of cancer.